John Harris was a long-haul trucker who had seen nearly every corner of the United States from behind the wheel of his 18-wheeler. His life was a series of endless highways, sleepless nights, and coffee-stained shirts. On this particular night, he was hauling a load of electronics from Chicago to Denver. The radio crackled with static as he switched through the stations, looking for something to keep him company during the long drive. The interstate was eerily quiet, with only the occasional car passing by. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 2:34 a.m. John yawned and rubbed his eyes. He needed a break, but the delivery was on a tight schedule. Then he saw it, a rusted green road sign barely illuminated by his headlights. Oak Hollow, 5 miles. Oak Hollow? John muttered to himself. He didn't remember seeing it on the map. He shrugged, thinking a detour through a small town might offer a chance to stretch his legs and grab a cup of coffee. He turned off the interstate and onto the narrow, winding road that led to Oak Hollow. The road twisted and turned through dense forests, the trees creating a tunnel that seemed to close in on him. The asphalt was cracked and uneven, and his truck's suspension groaned in protest. As he drove deeper into the woods, the sense of unease grew. The headlights cast long, shifting shadows, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional call of a night bird. John's grip tightened on the steering wheel when he saw a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a woman in a tattered dress, her hair matted and hanging over her face. She raised a hand as if to flag him down. Maybe she needs help, John thought. He slowed down and rolled down the window. You okay, ma'am? The woman didn't respond. She just stared at him with hollow, dark eyes. A shiver ran down John's spine. Something was wrong. He glanced around, but the road was empty except for his truck and the woman. Do you need a ride? He asked, though his instincts screamed for him to drive away. She stepped closer, her movements jerky and unnatural. John felt a chill in the air as she reached out a hand. Before he could react, she let out an ear-piercing scream that echoed through the trees. John slammed his foot on the gas, the truck lurching forward as he sped down the road, leaving the woman behind. John's heart pounded as he drove. The image of the woman burned into his mind. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was no sign of her. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and he began to wonder if he had made a mistake turning off the interstate. Just as he was about to consider turning back, he saw lights up ahead. He sighed in relief as he approached the small town. The sign at the town's entrance read, "Welcome to Oak Hollow," but something about the place felt off. The buildings were old and dilapidated, many with boarded-up windows and doors. The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows. John pulled up in front of a diner that looked like it hadn't been open in years. The neon sign flickered with the word "Diner," and he could see a faint light inside. He decided to take a chance and stepped out of the truck. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. The inside was as shabby as the exterior, with cracked vinyl seats and a layer of dust covering everything. A lone man stood behind the counter, wiping a glass with a dirty rag. "Can I help you?" the man asked, not looking up. John hesitated. "Yeah, just looking for some coffee and maybe directions. I'm on my way to Denver and took a wrong turn." The man finally looked up, his eyes dark and weary. "Coffee, huh? Haven't had anyone stop by for coffee in a long time." John took a seat at the counter as the man poured a cup of coffee. The air inside the diner was heavy and still, as if time had forgotten this place. John took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. It was bitter and cold, but he was too tired to care. "What's a trucker like you doing out here?" the man asked, his voice low and raspy. "Just needed a break from the interstate," John replied. "But this place seems different." The man let out a hollow laugh. "Different is one way to put it. Oak Hollow ain't on any map. People come here when they're lost, and they don't always leave." John felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" The man leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "This town has a way of keeping people. Strange things happen on that road you took. People see things that ain't there, hear things they shouldn't, and some folks just disappear." John's mind raced. The woman on the road, the eerie feeling, the abandoned town, it all seemed too surreal. "I saw a woman out there," he said. "She looked like she needed help, but something was off." The man's face darkened. "You saw her, huh? She's been out there for years, looking for someone to take her away, but no one ever does." John's skin prickled with goosebumps. "What happened to her?" "Nobody knows for sure," the man said. Some say she was left here by a lover. Others think she was a victim of something worse, but she's not the only one. There are others, trapped by this place, bound to the road. John felt a sense of dread settling over him. How do I get out of here? The man pointed to a map on the wall. There's only one way. Keep driving west and don't stop. No matter what you see or hear, keep going. Oak Hollow doesn't let go easy. John finished his coffee and stood up. Thanks for the warning. The man nodded. Good luck. You'll need it. John left the diner, the man's words echoing in his mind. The town seemed even more foreboding in the dim light. He climbed back into his truck, started the engine, and headed west as instructed. The road ahead was dark and winding, but he was determined to leave Oak Hollow behind. As he drove, the sense of unease grew stronger. The trees loomed overhead, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to him. He turned on the radio, hoping for some music to break the silence, but all he got was static. He switched it off, the quiet becoming almost deafening. Then he saw them, figures emerging from the shadows along the roadside. Men, women, and children, their faces pale and eyes hollow, watching him as he passed. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared with vacant expressions. John gripped the wheel tighter, refusing to slow down. Keep driving, he muttered to himself. Don't stop. The road seemed to stretch on forever, a never-ending nightmare. He glanced at the clock. 3:45 a.m. The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. He kept his eyes on the road, but the figures grew closer, their faces pressing against the windows, whispering things he couldn't understand. John's hands were slick with sweat. He pressed down on the gas pedal, urging the truck to go faster. The figures kept pace, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. He could feel their breath on his neck, their hands clawing at the doors. "Get away from me," he shouted, his voice hoarse with fear. Just as John thought he couldn't take any more, he saw a light ahead. A small gas station, its neon sign flickering weakly. He swerved into the parking lot, his heart pounding. The figures vanished as he came to a stop, leaving him in a pool of dim light. He took a moment to catch his breath, then climbed out of the truck. The gas station was old and run down, but it was a beacon of hope in the oppressive darkness. He approached the door, which creaked open to reveal an elderly man behind the counter. "Need some gas?" the man asked, his voice surprisingly strong. "Yeah," John replied, trying to steady his voice, "and directions. How do I get out of here?" The man nodded as if he understood. "Fill her up, and I'll get you a map." John returned to the truck and began pumping gas. The night air was cool, and he felt a slight sense of relief. But that relief was short-lived. As he glanced around, he saw a figure standing at the edge of the light, a young man with a backpack, his thumb out as if hitchhiking. "Hey!" John called out. "You need a ride?" The hitchhiker stepped into the light, his eyes wide with fear. "Please, you have to help me. This place, it's not right." John hesitated, then nodded. "Get in. I'm heading west." The hitchhiker climbed into the passenger seat, and John finished pumping the gas. He paid the elderly man, who handed him a worn map. "Eyes up, just follow the main road," the man said. "And whatever you do, don't take any turns." John thanked him and got back into the truck. The hitchhiker was trembling, his eyes darting around nervously. "What's your name?" John asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Tom," the young man replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tom Edwards." As they drove, Tom began to open up. He was a college student from New York, hitchhiking across the country on a break. He had stumbled upon Oak Hollow by accident, much like John, and quickly realized something was terribly wrong. "I saw people on the road," Tom said, his voice shaking. "They weren't real. I mean, they looked real, but something was off. They were like ghosts, trapped here." John nodded, his own experiences echoing Tom's words. "I saw them too, and a woman. She screamed at me." Tom's face went pale. "The woman in the dress? I've seen her. She tried to grab me. This place, it plays tricks on you, makes you see things." John glanced at Tom, then back at the road. "The man at the gas station said we need to keep driving west and not take any turns. Do you think we can trust him?" Tom hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It's the best advice we've got. I tried to leave before, but every road led me back here. We have to keep going." The road ahead was dark and winding, the trees closing in like a tunnel. John kept his eyes on the road, but the silence was oppressive. The figures began to appear again, lining the roadside, their hollow eyes following the truck's progress. John tightened his grip on the wheel. "Whatever happens, we don't stop. Got it? Tom nodded, his face set in determination. Got it. As they drove, the whispers started again, low and unintelligible at first, then growing louder. John tried to ignore them, but they seemed to seep into his mind, filling it with a cold dread. He glanced at Tom, who was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The figures grew bolder, stepping onto the road, forcing John to swerve to avoid them. Each time he did, the truck seemed to slow, as if something was trying to drag it back. The whispers became shouts, the faces pressed against the windows, pleading and screaming. "Keep driving," Tom shouted, his voice breaking the spell. "Don't stop." John's hands were slick with sweat as he pressed down on the gas pedal, urging the truck to go faster. The figures fell behind, their screams fading into the distance, but the road seemed endless, a never-ending nightmare. After what felt like hours, the road began to change. The trees thinned and the oppressive darkness started to lift. John glanced at the clock, 4:55 a.m. Dawn was approaching, and with it a sense of hope. "Do you think we're getting out?" Tom asked, his voice filled with a cautious optimism. John nodded. "I think so. Just a little further." The road straightened and the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. But as they neared the edge of the forest, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. It was the woman in the dress, her arms outstretched, blocking their path. "Not again," John muttered, his heart pounding. Tom grabbed his arm. "Don't stop. Just go through her. She's not real." John swallowed hard and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck barreled forward and the woman didn't move. Just as they were about to hit her, she vanished, leaving only a lingering scream. They burst out of the forest and onto a clear, open road. The sky was brightening, and the oppressive feeling lifted. John and Tom exchanged relieved glances. John kept driving until they reached a rest stop just outside of Denver. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over everything. He pulled into the parking lot and turned off the engine, both men sitting in stunned silence for a moment. "We made it," Tom said, his voice filled with wonder. John nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. "Yeah, we did." They climbed out of the truck, stretching and breathing in the warm air. It felt like they had escaped from a nightmare, stepping back into the real world. Tom turned to John. "Thank you. I don't think I could have made it out alone." John smiled. "We're both lucky to be out of there. Just remember, no more detours." Tom chuckled, the sound filled with genuine relief. No more detours. As they parted ways, John couldn't help but glance back at the road they had traveled. Oak Hollow was behind them, but the memory of the haunted town would stay with them forever. He climbed back into his truck, ready to complete his journey to Denver, thankful to leave the abandoned road behind. John knew he would never forget the eerie figures, the ghostly woman, and the sense of dread that had clung to him throughout the night. But he also knew he had survived, and that was all that mattered. With a deep breath, he started the engine and drove away, the sun rising on a new day.